The world is desaturated and barren, the UI ranging from extremes of grey to beige. Yes, here we are. We're playing Total War Attila. And we're also playing with the Medieval 1212 AD mod, aka we're playing Medieval Total War 3. In this mod I wanted to play as Wales, however it turns out you're not allowed to play as Wales, so I decided to do the next best thing, the next logical choice, and that is to play as the Mongols instead. Because, as the Mongols, you're a horde faction, that means you are not limited to any particular area, you're at liberty to waste the early game, walking across the entire map if you want to, and I did want to. We're going on a quest with our little Mongol horde. I've actually got two hordes, and I'm keeping them apart because there's some mechanic in the game, I forget what it does exactly, there's some problem you get if you keep your hordes close together, they infight. So, we've got two little adventures, one going over the Caspian Sea and one going over land. Here's me remembering that your troops die if you walk about during winter, just more misery, good to be back. And one feature of the Medieval 1212 AD mod is that it's winter quite a lot of the time because the year length, the turn length I should say, is an odd amount of time. It's not like one turn per season or anything like that, so we just sort of switch between seasons quite a lot. And frequently those seasons are annoying. Now our journey could have been peaceful, but as we saw there, I decided to declare war on a faction that was blocking a river crossing so I could cross it a little bit faster. I thought, well, that's just a tiny army, we can walk past them and that'll be no problem. We'll come back to that. Here's me realizing that you can actually encamp for free every turn. I thought it cost movement to encamp. It actually doesn't, and that's a bad thing because it means you should always encamp. So I have to remember to actually do it. There's no disadvantage other than that you have to click the mouse a few times. Would be nice if it was automatic. There's me executing some invisible deserters, the classic Attila exploit question mark. Where if your integrity gets low, you just say execute deserters, you don't actually lose any troops, and your integrity comes back. Handy, another pointless couple of clicks just to keep things going. And now we immediately face the consequences of barging past those guys. They come back with some friends and chase after me, so it's an army of mostly horse archers versus our army of mostly horse archers, but I have more. So I had a simple grand strategy to outshoot them, and here's that strategy being put into action, or not, as it were. Our guys just kind of stood there. I think it's because my formation is too deep. It calculates whether you can shoot or not based on your average position. So being in a column formation means the guys at the front can't shoot because guys further back can't. Something. We get janked and our shooting plan goes out the window, especially when the enemy's melee cav just run at us and there's not too much we can do about that. Horse archers have two weaknesses, foot archers and light cavalry. Trying to cross the steppe means we will be facing quite a lot of the latter, and going to Wales, my apparent plan, could mean we face quite a lot of the former as well. At least there is something we can do about it. Sacrifice troops. Always a good plan. We just have to get the enemy's melee cav into a fight somewhere and have the horse archers then shoot into it to eventually win. Here's the kind of fight I would like to see, but it's not actually working. 3 of our horse archer units could potentially outshoot that one enemy unit, but our guys aren't doing it. Back at it again in Total War Attila, as ugly on the inside as it is on the outside. Oh well. At least in theory. We're doing something here. We're out horse archering units sometimes, and we're just isolating pockets and shooting at them. Here was me in the replay, wondering how much our troops actually were shooting, because I had noticed they didn't shoot too much. It seems that some elements of units will shoot more often than others, so I was just staring at this one guy in particular to get an idea of the firing rate. Well, it's not especially high, and it might just be because of the animations, but they tend to do nothing a lot of the time, giving off perhaps the illusion that it's not really working, or maybe it really isn't working. Here's an example of a unit sort of firing at the enemy. A couple of guys loosed off arrows and got a couple of kills for that nice rear shot there. Oh well. I'm not going to commentate on this battle really because it's just an absolute mess all over the place. I'm trying to skirmish away from the enemy manually and isolate pockets and surround and pound where I can, and have the horse archers generally shoot the enemy down. I had success with this strategy playing as the Parthians in the remake of Rome Total War somewhat recently, so I was kind of just channeling that energy. But unfortunately it doesn't work, and that phrase is true on several levels here. One thing I noted as well is that this is what I like to call an infinite morale game. Here, this trash spear unit is fighting to the last man, and that's one of the things I've noted about mods for Total War games in general. They tend to increase morale to the point when morale doesn't matter anymore. And both Attila and this mod have fun morale things that I guess I'll talk about another time that make morale higher than it's meant to be in most cases. Here's an example of something fun as well. Eventually, I ordered everybody to withdraw. I just thought, this is going terribly, I'm just leaving. However, if you withdraw and then rout midway through and then stop routing, that stops you from withdrawing. So here you can see our general stops and stays behind. This is okay if you're microing closely enough to make them withdraw again, but I had it on maximum battle speed. I just hit withdraw and then waited for them to leave. Unfortunately, they stopped again and died while I wasn't looking. So that's one of the great Mongol commanders, Subadai, now super dead. Or is he? We're actually going to see him again shortly for some reason, not quite sure why. The battle was okay, both sides lost about the same amount, and we even got to retreat in the direction I was going anyway, so you could say we made some progress with that. However, the enemy didn't really lose any units, and in a Total War game with free replenishment, it's unit losses that actually matter in any sort of long term. Now, I was going to get away with this until the Alans randomly declared war on me, appeared from the fog of war, and came in for the finish. So unfortunately, half of our troops are now gone, and one of our hordes as well, because these armies also contain our civilian population and all of your buildings and such. They get deleted with the army as well. Therefore, that route didn't go very well. I suppose we'll check in with the other horde. Well, they're having a much easier time of things, and they peacefully make it to the Mediterranean. Now they can just sail to our destination. And while you're at sea, all of your horde stuff still works somehow, a nice feature of the game, so all of our cow pastures and such will just miraculously keep going. We'll be fine out there. We've also got this random political event. Somebody's saying we're going to bring the end of days. Well, let's let that guy live then, so he can keep saying it and maybe keep morale up, because so far doesn't appear to be the case. Then we get an event saying the Mongol Invasion is happening, and I thought, well, isn't that me? Turns out there's actually a second wave of the invasion. If we'd waited around in our starting location, we would have got given all of this stuff. Some bigger armies with heavier units in them, all looking good. The thing is, I've already left, now I have to commit to having these armies follow me, thinking maybe one day they'll arrive in Wales as well and can join my main campaign once it really gets started. Pretty annoying to micro all of these armies to get there, but I decided to commit to it just for fun, which proved to be a mistake, as we'll soon be seeing. Because lots of people have been declaring war on us just for no reason, the route to the Mediterranean is now packed with enemies, so I ended up fighting some people on the way. This really isn't going to have any impact on anything, and that's because the money you get from sacking a settlement as you go is very poor. Here we can get like 1,000 money. This army, well, like one unit in the army costs about 500 per turn to upkeep, so clearly these numbers are irrelevant. If you multiplied them by 10, they might still be irrelevant, so any kind of sacking based gameplay style is out the window. That said though, as we were sailing along, we come across Constantinople, barely defended, the capital of the Roman Empire as it remains, one of the centers of civilization of the world, the perfect target for the Mongol horde. And you know I had to do it to them really, so we stop off here to fight them. We can fight them from the sea because it's a port city, don't even have to land, and they had nothing there, so they just die instantly. The money is a bit better this time, but still pretty trash, and for 3 armies worth of upkeep, that wouldn't have been worth it. We actually don't pay upkeep on these armies, by the way, but I'll get back to that later. For now, we raise Constantinople, thus making a big impact probably in some way. A propaganda victory, the Mongol Scourge is here, but we've got a holiday to Wales booked, so we're going away again. Our leading elements now arrive at the Bay of Cefythyn, I think it's called, the Gower Peninsula, here in Wales, our holiday destination, where we're going to encamp on the shore and get some more units. I originally thought, well, I'll just sit here and wait for our 5 extra stacks to show up, then we'll conquer Wales and see where the wind takes us from there. However, It became clear that was going to take an extremely long time, so after a couple of turns of waiting I thought, well, I can probably do it with just the first army, let's go take a look, and indeed there's not too much actually here. One thing they'll have on their side though is their fortifications. That's going to make it very hard for us to do anything as a horse archer army, very historically accurate. So for now, I just thought I'll sit here and make siege weapons and wait for a way to get in. Eventually, because the walls degrade under siege, we get this thing on the tooltip, the minimum breaches 1. That means if we fight a battle, there'll be at least some way for the cav to get in without using any of our siege weapons. You can see the balance bar though is really far in our favour. We could just take this place for free in an auto-resolve, but I was convinced otherwise. I thought this place is packed with longbows, spearmen and heavy cavalry. This would be really hard for us to take, especially with just one breach to use. So I'm going to avoid that free win and actually do this the hard way. So here we are on a nice miserable battlefield, shooting at that one breach. We need to get our army through that gap in the wall, but the AI is defending it with spears, so we can't do anything until our archers have tried to clear them out. Well, there was one other thing I could try, but it didn't go very far. That is to use my catapults. We have some Chinese siege engineers ready to open up another breach for us in theory. The problem is, the enemy have longbows guarding the walls, so we can't get too close, and a direct hit by the catapults only does 2% damage to a wall. That means we need to hit the same spot 50 times to make another breach, and these things aren't accurate enough and probably don't even have enough ammunition to actually do that. Therefore, nothing really happened over here, and I don't think it was even possible for something to happen. We are stuck with our one breach. I sit here shooting into it. Eventually they send some guys who throw jabs back out and take out some of the horse archers. Inconvenient, but we can stay at a distance. The AI will never leave the breach to counterattack, so as long as you're out of their range, you can shoot freely, and we take down a whole bunch more stuff. Down goes some heavy cav there, that's good to see. We are, though, quickly running out of ammunition. That's going to be the great problem for us, the most unrealistic problem for the Mongol army. We're also on fire here, which is less of a problem than you'd think, because it wasn't until Total War 3 Kingdoms where they added the ability for fire to do damage. I think Attila was the game where they added fire as a thing, as a mechanic. It just doesn't actually do anything, and that's helping us out quite a lot. Here's some footage of me shooting some more knights who showed up. One thing to note about all this is that in the actual battle, I couldn't see the enemy army because of line of sight. I could only see what was near the breach and the longbowmen facing off against the catapults. So it was kind of a mystery to me how much stuff was actually going to come to the breach and get killed. I was just waiting for the opportunity to go through once it looked like there was nothing there. And I also noted in this replay that my heavy cavalry have bows. I didn't know that when I was playing because I'm not very good at things. It would have been given away if I'd checked out the fact they had an ammunition bar. So they're just standing there not helping. They could actually be shooting down the enemy. I guess there are off fire at will and such, probably by accident, because I think they're supposed to default to fire at will. Well, I don't even know what happened. Something bad. It could be my fault, but let's distract from that by checking out the lack of footwear on these Welsh troops. No shoes, no service from me. They're quite well armoured and armed, they just lack the shoes, which makes me think it was a choice from them perhaps. Maybe it's giving them some advantage, maybe they're just going for the Hobbit look. We take out a few troops by the gate, but then more stuff just shows up. As I said, I don't know how much stuff is in the town at this stage, so when some cav just appears and attacks me, I just have to sit there and take it. What I can do though is shoot them in the back with our horse archers. So this is fine really. Our heavy cav will act as suitable tanks to take out this otherwise dangerous enemy cav unit that could wreak havoc among our horse archers. We push deeper in and go after that tower there with this blob. I've got tons of units trying to take the tower at the same time. And again, another cav unit appears and gets us stuck in this little cul-de-sac. So now all of our cav's going to be pretty much wasted. But again, the arrows are still falling. We've still got a little bit of ammo on some units. I brought the units that were part of the catapult assault team over to provide extra arrows. We then clear those cav out the way and start shooting towards the capture point where their heavy cav under their general are waiting, along with a bunch of longbows who could just mow down my horse archers. Fortunately, they're just doing something other than that, and that's the only reason we're still alive, going quite well actually. My melee cav, who could clear the way, are busy killing a different longbow unit on the other side of the map. Not really so useful, I just saw the opportunity to do so. One thing, by the way, about this mod that I remember from the last time I played it is that ranged units are really strong in melee. That's one of the standout battle balancing choices, so it's actually quite hard to take out archers with cavalry. I seem to remember the highest melee defense stats that I saw last time I played the game were on random trash archer units, and I figured that was just some balancing mistake or a typo or something. It still seems to be the case. Enemy archers are not very vulnerable to our cav, although our cav are also shock cavalry, so some of their stats are spec'd into charging instead of melee fighting. Here's the ultimate conclusion of the fight. I just sort of ran horse archers into the capture point area. We'd managed to kill all of the knights in the area with arrows, and the longbowmen were just sort of driven away, and we ended up taking the capture point. Although we didn't take out the longbowmen, to the contrary, they gathered up and started absolutely agincoring us to death, so I just started running away from them and trying to avoid melee. It wasn't going very well. Here's me trying to open a gate to let some reinforcements in, but that doesn't matter. We just win on the victory countdown in the end. And that was that. It wasn't so bad. No units lost, which may equate to nothing being lost whatsoever. Now what we don't want to do is take this place, because then we wouldn't be a horde anymore. We'd lose all of our horde buildings and ability to recruit units in particular. So we're going to subjugate them instead. That's ideal. Now we have Wales as a vassal, and we can sit here using our camp to build up our units, plus recruit units from the Welsh recruitment pool using this levy system. Very nice. That's kind of my objective completed. I just came here to do that and then see what happens afterwards. I had this vague notion that maybe we could shepherd Wales into conquering territory for us and we'll remain a horde. Well, we'll see how that goes. For now, it's time for celebrations because I bribed the Welsh into allowing me to marry into their royal family. So now, our next generation of commanders are technically half Welsh. They have a Welsh stepmother, and that's about as close to playing as Wales as we're going to be able to get. Well, it's closer than I thought we'd get. That's pretty good. It also cements our vassalship arrangement with Wales, and because I had to pay them so much to get that to even happen, now Wales has loads of money, and maybe they'll use that to become stronger, thus allowing me to help them conquer the world. There's a massive problem though that was hinted at earlier. It turns out my armies had free upkeep, and this is me also finding out about this when it tells me it's about to go away. All of these stacks trailing at the back, I thought they were just sort of paying for themselves because they have the horde buildings that generate money in the background, and maybe it was all fine, maybe they've been set up to be cash neutral for you by the scripting. As we learn in the next turn, that is not at all the case. We are now losing 30 grand per turn as the free upkeep goes away, and I finally check the horde buildings on these stacks. There aren't any, so these people I should say, aren't generating us any money. That means we're going to have to get rid of them ultimately after spending so long microing these 5 or 6 stacks across the map. They're of no use to us. Or are they? I did have one last cunning plan. I figured what I'd do is start landing the stacks and then building up the hordes to make some money. Obviously that won't help us unless we also do this. If we throw all of the troops out and just leave one officer commanding each horde, all of the economy side of things remains the same, it just costs less. So we might be able to make enough buildings in our 1 unit horde to pay for that 1 unit and maybe more. We could use these things to just sit somewhere on the map and generate money for us. That was the idea. We can get a bit more money by selling our services to random factions in the form of joining people's wars for cash and then of course just ignoring them. By joining wars on the other side of the map, we're relatively safe from having to do anything about it, but we still get sent the money. Ultimately though, this all fails simply because the cost of upgrading a horde was way too large. We couldn't build the economy in our hordes, and I started to get rid of them. I also started raiding the English to make a bit more money. But as mentioned before, sacking and raiding, this sort of stuff, costs much more money to do than you get, so all it does is make your army have less upkeep if you want to keep the army for something afterwards. Here's me checking out England. I was happy to see they were at war with people in the far south in France, and figured they might not actually come back to take any revenge on me if I started getting up to some shenanigans. However, more vulnerable to shenanigans is Scotland, because they only have 2 territories and no allies, so I figured let's go up there and try to make some cash by attacking them. As already mentioned several times now, this was a forlorn hope, but we're doing it anyway, if only to be doing something in the game. So we attack, lose a bunch of troops but nothing serious. We can sack the place for a couple of thousand, that's effectively nothing. We would have made much more money if I'd just disbanded this army. But then if you don't really have any armies, it kind of feels like you're not playing the game, so I feel obligated to keep one army alive. We can of course just send one character into the very corner of the sea, the horde will still develop, and we probably won't lose the campaign or do anything. But we're going to have some gameplay in this gameplay commentary. And what terrible gameplay it's going to be. Check out this diplomatic maneuver from me. I realised we can get some cash off Scotland by getting a peace treaty immediately. This would suit me because I can then just encamp and replenish for a bit, and then kill them later. But I figured, aha, if I also raise Edinburgh so they have even less, I'll get more money in the peace deal, and you are allowed to sack and raise a place in the same turn, and even then encamp in the same turn since it doesn't cost any movement points. Then we go to Scotland, hoping to get more cash. Nope. We're going to get less cash, we're going to get no cash. I originally thought maybe they'd be my vassal, not at all. Peace was off the table after I raised their capital. Was it something I did? Well, now they want to fight us to the end and we're just stuck with that. Here was a fun glitch, where I was trying to get this horde to move at sea, but it appeared to be stuck. It does have full movement points and it's one turn away from having gone to the sea, which also costs movement points and stops you moving. I should be able to move this fleet. Well, I couldn't. I eventually got mad and just disbanded it, but it was still there. What must have happened was 2 fleets got stuck to each other and one of them was immobilized by this. We had 2 hordes right on top of each other, a multi-level horde. Well, one of them's still alive. I'm trying to get these guys over to Britain now, hoping to maybe offset their costs by raiding some more English territory and getting some big cash. Meanwhile, the main force is besieging Inverness. Of course, we need to besiege it for a long time to do anything here, unfortunately. It's going to take several turns before we get that guaranteed breach, and we know the catapult's pretty useless. So we just leave them to it. In the meantime, here are some fun dramas to deal with. England declares war on me, and that's going to be a big issue for a long time, of course, because they are a major faction. In fact, they were the #1 faction the last time I checked. So if they want to kill us, they can. Fortunately, as we saw, they actually didn't pursue me as I withdrew into Wales and stopped raiding, but because I can't raid them very safely anymore, we do have to start downsizing even more. I was desperate to keep a couple of my hordes alive, especially after all the time it took to get them here, and that leads to this fun sequence. First, this little raiding force is countered. They push us back to our Welsh allies. However, Wales is not at war with England, therefore they don't support us in this battle. If the Welsh garrison and army came out, we might be able to actually win. Instead, we are just stuck, and I was facing the loss of my horde. I was pretty annoyed about this, and then of course I remembered there's one way to not lose this battle. We start poking around in the menu. It's time to find the thing that sets up the battle time limit. I eventually find it. What we can do is set the battle time limit to the minimum possible, set the difficulty to easy, and then just try to not lose for long enough that we technically win, and the enemy will just retreat and our army will survive. This does not work, because we've already retreated this turn. I think that means you can't have a timer-based battle. So the timer was unlimited, I was forced to lose. Our horde is destroyed. Then, shortly after, our other horde lands next to our Welsh allies and is immediately attacked again, making the same mistake twice. Good gameplay from Devin. Then I realised, well, I just retreated from their attack. That means I'm going to get another unlimited timer battle. Instead, I'll reload the autosave and fight them the first time they attack me, so that we can do the timer exploit. But then, things actually go differently after reloading the save. This time, our main force is attacked by the English in the north. We could probably take down one of their armies, But for them, even though they aren't allied to Scotland, Scotland will support them in this battle because it's a siege, I guess. So we're being attacked from behind by a much bigger army at the same time, and things don't look good. I thought we'll have to withdraw from this. It's really annoying because it takes us so many turns to be able to make a siege attack that withdrawing there means we're doomed to spend at least like 5 more turns before we have any chance of taking Inverness. Then though, we get the battle I was going for right here, where we can sit in the corner, and half the time limit's gone before the enemy are even in view. It's taking them ages to walk towards me. However, then there's another twist, because there's this mechanic that I remembered once it happened. I'd totally forgotten about this. If you try to exploit the timer in some Total War games, it tries to stop you. So now it's taking away our morale bit by bit as the battle goes on, in an attempt to stop us winning a battle where the balance bar is really far in the enemy's favour. And the question was, could we last under that pressure? The answer was no, we ran out of morale before the timer ran out. Unfortunately, the scam is over. All of our hordes are dead. Except for, of course, our main force, which now has to try and do something from this perilous situation. What I tried was hiding in the wilderness for a little bit. I thought the English might walk off and do something else, thus allowing me to have the time to come back and do the long siege we need here at Inverness. That was not what happened though. They were still standing around nearby, and they counterattack with loads of stuff, and that's a terrible situation. We retreat, we pray that they don't come and just kill us, and fortunately they don't. That would have been the end of the campaign right there. We are scraping along the bottom of our fortunes, it seems. I decided to go and do something else instead. I noticed that Wales were at war with Ireland, and I thought let's go help our vassal do that instead. So we'll leave the Scottish and the English for now. We sail over in search of an easier target and maybe a bit of money as well. Ireland don't even have a full stack of troops, so that's looking good, but they do have a garrison and walls to deal with. I thought maybe I'd raid in their territory, get them to come out, fight them in the field, and then go in for the siege. Here's what actually happened. While I was raiding, England came after me. There's actually a land route between Ireland and Scotland you can take without it counting as sailing. So it really would have just taken them like 1 or 2 turns to come after me after they know I was here. The AI can see into the fog of war, by the way, in this game, so you can't hide from them per se. They always know where you are. So they happen to walk into Ireland, quote-unquote randomly, and encounter us with this battle. Luckily, it's a doable battle, so I thought we're going to have to just stand our ground and actually defeat them to try and buy ourselves some time for the Ireland project. We begin the engagement with an actual tactic. I ran at the enemy's longbows and then immediately fell back. The idea there is to just make the longbows fall back as well and stop them from firing off their first couple of volleys. Then all we need to do is keep them moving. The AI usually has its ranged units on skirmish mode all the time. That means if you just run at them, they'll not shoot because they'll constantly be moving away from you. And here with this nice messy formation, we can run at them from various points all the time and just try to stop ourselves being longbowed to death while we shortbow to death the enemy's melee units. Their second army, as you might have noted there, is not present for this part of the fight, allowing us to envelop the enemy army. This is absolutely ideal. They're using a shield wall formation here to try and defend themselves. It's not doing terribly well. I think it increases your chance to block by 20% or something, much weaker than in other mods or other versions of Attila. So the shield wall won't really block our arrows, we can shoot into it just fine. Here our lancers still struggle to actually kill the enemy longbows, but as long as they're moving around, that helps. They're an example of them actually getting a volley off. Those longbows can mow down our horse archers if they actually shoot at us, so we do need to be careful. Meanwhile, we're mowing down the enemy's foot knights. Now that is glorious. Our horse archers have armor-piercing shots, so things like knights aren't too much of a worry. We can do extra damage to them, or do some damage to them I should say. They're less immortal than they'll be in melee combat. Elsewhere, some decent manual skirmishing keeps us away from the enemy, and we ultimately take down this first army. There's another example of that infinite morale thing I mentioned, a unit with 1 or 2 guys in it fighting amid this huge horde of our forces. That's an early game unit. We can rest assured that late game units will be probably unroutable. Here comes the second army then, leading with this wedge night charge. I had formed up to just fire a massive volley at them as they arrived. This did approximately nothing. And here, our master stroke of strategy. Everybody gets off their horses. Why did this happen? Well, it's because I tried to put the line onto regular skirmish mode to stay away from those cavalry units, and I accidentally clicked the dismount button instead, which looks a little bit similar and is right next to it. Here's what this looked like from above. I couldn't tell when I was playing that my troops had dismounted, so it took me a long time to notice. Just because I play on the maximum zoom, I can't really tell what's going on the ground. As it turns out though, dismounting was less of a problem than I thought, because while we're theoretically more weak against these enemy cavalry units, we actually take them down extremely fast. That's because the dismounted horse archers are much better about actually attacking the enemy. So multiple volleys go out fast, and we're mowing those knights down. It's going to be a bit more of a struggle to skirmish, but not everything is dismounted, so what I end up doing is having the mounted units kind of distract the enemy, while the dismounted ones fire away, and we get lucky with this lancer attack that was intended to take out this enemy ballista unit. We also killed their king in a brief melee, so that will provide a morale debuff. Also, it's still on easy difficulty by the way, which is also debuffing the enemy in some way. Of course the game doesn't tell you, but I think morale is almost certainly one thing that gets better on lower difficulties. Well, the morale still seems to be pretty high, so I guess it doesn't make that much difference. Ultimately, this plan is a success, the plan of just tanking the enemy with our mounted units, although here we're taking some nice pike attacks onto our heavy cav, not so good. Our archers were able to kill the enemy before we ran out of arrows, that's really all this came down to. And the catapults even made a brief appearance. They spent most of the fight just moving towards the battlefield. They got a few kills as well. Leading to this final result, we annihilated the enemy. A couple of units that didn't really engage escaped, but most of their army's dead. We killed their king, I believe, as well. We can take on a few warriors, and that's that. So we've bought ourselves some time, and we're going to use that time immediately, because my plan to draw out the Irish also works. We're now going to fight the Irish army. It's not as strong as the English one, so even though we're damaged, this battle looks a little bit easier according to the balance bar. And speaking of difficulty, I did remember to go and reset the settings now. We're going to put it on normal and 60 minutes, the default setup. I'm too cowardly to go for hard right now because things are seeming a bit too hard already. Not that I actually know what it does, as alluded to, it might be fine. More trouble from night charges right here. We probably could get out of the way a bit more effectively than we did. I guess I wasn't paying enough attention. Handily they managed to not charge through and kill my catapult crew, that's nice. Then we lock them down for the sacrifice and pound strategy. Elsewhere, just like in the last battle, we want to keep things as messy as we can and try to keep those longbows either in melee or moving. Here you can see I paused. That's because I wanted to try and get the stats up on the screen to see if these longbows really did have high melee defense. However, you can't check the stats of a unit in a replay unless you've recently done it in a regular battle. There's a weird kind of system going on. We can't see the stats. Doesn't matter. We just do the strategy. It doesn't matter what their attacking stats are, at least, if we can keep them walking around and not really doing very much. And the more chaotic and messy the battle gets, the easier it's going to be to keep those longbows running about. And we're successful in this strategy, and once we've taken them out, we can then focus on the other stuff, which is just being fruitlessly kited around for now. We're wasting the enemy's strength. These are the types of annoying horse archer tactics we like to see. We're able to grab the general kill somewhere in the middle, nearly losing my own general in the process, and that's going to start finishing off some of their weaker units, eventually leading to this result once we've Mongoled everything that's still alive. Our army is in pretty bad condition, but theirs is basically dead. That's going to make taking their settlement much easier. We still though face the prospect of a long siege because we still need to get inside the enemy settlement. However, some English survivors come down to challenge our siege, and that's going to be pretty useful for us. It triggers a field battle where the Irish garrison will come outside. Here's a chance to thin them out and make things even easier for us. And the English army itself isn't too bad to deal with. We don't even need to deal with them right away. because the enemy's reinforcements will be coming onto the field in our deployment zone, so we just turn around at the very start of the battle and start fighting the Irish right here. We're going to prioritize shooting our armor-piercing shot at those 2 knight units that are advancing out a little bit. Those are the key targets. However, while I'm focused on doing that, their longbows will be able to set up quite easily, and because they're up against the line on the edge of the map, it's going to be harder for us to go around and be behind them to keep them skirmishing around, so this could be a disadvantage for us, and fighting near the edge of the map isn't always a good idea when you're doing a siege draw-out battle like this, because the enemy can escape more easily and get back behind their walls. We lose a horse archer unit very quickly. That particular sacrifice and shoot strategy didn't go very well. Everybody else is legging it, and that's going to do the business though. It's sort of hard to tell how effective this is because each individual model has an invisible health bar. So the health bar you see is the unit's health bar. A unit with full health can technically be on the complete verge of death and will crumble the moment you touch them if all of the invisible health bars are low. In some of the later Total War games, they did fix that a bit by making the unit health bar be somewhat based on the model's health as well. I still don't really like the health system. Got some nice longbow lockdown going on there, and we get an early general kill as I try to finish off those heavy cav. That's going to help us out. So most of our horse archers will be focused on trying to kill this one unit back here. That leaves not very much dealing with the infantry. We can just ignore the melee infantry, of course. It's the longbowmen I'm really worried about. So worried, I charged my nearly dead general right into the middle of the enemy army, just to provide a few seconds of additional distraction. Looks like I've now finished off the enemy's heavy cav though, so we can get down to business. Once all of our horse archers and few remaining melee cav units have charged in to engage the longbows, I hoped to quickly rout them off the field. Again, we're going to have that trouble with not being able to kill them, and some of our guys don't appear to be trying especially hard. I think the horse archers are both unenthusiastic at range and in melee. And as mentioned, we're fighting the enemy on the line, so the second they rout, they'll just run away. Although with their high morale, not many of them will survive until the routing point, so we kill most of the Irish army, and then here we have a brief secondary battle against the English army that attacked. Really, the only thing to worry about is this heavy cav unit. It was just trotting merrily in the middle of our encirclement, as you can see, so we just shoot them down. The only remaining issue now is that we could run out of ammo before we finish off the English. Normally, I think a historical Mongol army in this situation would just find some more arrows. We're even on top of a battlefield full of arrow-strewn bodies. We might be able to just pick some up. Well, we happen to have enough arrows on our horses to rout those last couple of units, and we get this final result. We did lose some of our melee cav in the fights against the longbows, but the enemy were completely destroyed. I was worried that some enemy units would make it out of the battle and re-garrison the town. I did not expect to get this result, where we actually take the town immediately. We're going to go for the subjugation again to preserve our horde. Now we have an additional vassal that will give us some money, and perhaps more importantly for now, a safe place to sit down and get our troops back. We've achieved something, we've expanded our little empire, and we can sit on the other side of Dublin from the English's approaching route. We can upgrade our horde, replenish our troops, and just chill for a bit. It seems our Mongol expedition to Wales has not been a complete disaster so far after nearly being defeated recently. While we chill, I noticed this interesting unit available to recruit, some heavy hand gunner infantry. I thought that sounded pretty good, but I was hesitating to buy it because I thought it's probably really bad, this 1200s gun infantry. Well, I eventually tried to buy it, thinking maybe this would be fun, but the fun was ruined before I finished recruiting it. This happened. England suddenly appeared. They didn't come from the top right like I was expecting, but from the bottom left. They've gone via some long route to attack from an unexpected direction. Very sneaky. Well, we could take them down here. However, I decided to take the gamble of going for the retreat. A gamble because you don't know where the retreat will be to. It could be to some really stupid location that causes you to die instantly. It was okay. We retreated away from the enemy and around our vassal settlement. From there, I just kept running away because there was one thing I knew I had to do now. If England have deployed their troops to Ireland, that means we attack England while they're not there, of course. However, they are a rich and powerful faction. There was also an army defending Edinburgh, the closest target I had. That means it's not going to be quite as easy as I thought, but we still do have an opportunity here because they have this tiny group standing in the plains outside Edinburgh. We can attack them to trigger a classic siege draw out. If we can fight the Edinburgh garrison now in this regular battle, we might avoid a long siege where the English would probably catch up to us. So here we are. In this replay we'll have the stats on the screen. The stats are on the screen in replays if the last time you played a regular battle in campaign you had the stats open and looked at them. You can't actually control them on this screen, so they're just there now. Enjoy seeing the numbers that I usually ignore for most of the campaign. Now, as you can see, my opening strategy is to defeat the small army we attacked initially. And that's going to be really easy. It was just a couple of units, and the AI was trying to hold its ground and defend, causing them to just die with no consequences for us. And then, while walking towards the next part of the battle, I started actually looking at those numbers, and I noticed something unusual about our morale. I thought our morale is very high, it's being boosted by something. On the tooltip it breaks down why your morale is the number that it is. The problem is, we can do a bit of maths here and work out something seems to be amiss. If we add 25, minus 7, 10 and 16, we don't get 43. It seems that the morale of all units is higher than it's supposed to be according to the current morale effects. I would expect that of the AI because the AI cheats, but I did check and it also affects my units as well. This could explain the things we've seen before, where units are fighting down to the last man and taking 99% casualties without routing. Morale is just higher than it's meant to be, and as long as the morale never falls to 0, the unit can't rout. So if the morale bonuses make it so that all of the traditional penalties don't make the number go down to 0, then indeed it can't rout. So maybe that's what's going on there. We now begin a regular battle where we're just going to keep our distance and shoot the enemy. There was an example of something I call forward skirmishing, where our horse archers charged into the enemy's billhook troops, their pike type unit. I'm not sure what causes it, but sometimes if you put a unit on skirmish mode, it runs towards the enemy rather than away once they get close. I think it only affects cavalry, and it's pretty inconvenient. One of the reasons you probably should manually skirmish, but I didn't want to. Now, as for the battle, there's not too much to say. We're just going to run all over the place and shoot arrows, trying to avoid engagements wherever we can. As long as we don't run out of ammo, we'll eventually win with this strategy. We don't even have to rout the enemy, so the morale complaints don't matter so much. There's another case of forward skirmish, although I caught it at the last possible second and avoided a disastrous fight. So we end up with this result. We barely lost anything, the enemy got completely annihilated, a perfect Mongoling, that's what we like to see, and indeed Edinburgh is left defenceless so we don't have to siege it. Now though, we're not allowed to make a vassal here, and I don't want to stop being a horde and lose all of my buildings, so we have to make a difficult choice. We can sack it of course, but that won't make any progress for us because the amount of money you get is so low. Then I spotted this button that I'd never seen before. We can gift the region to our allies. I was amazed by this, a feature I'd always wished was available. It was just there, I don't know how long it's been there for, maybe it's just in this mod or something. I decide to give the territory to Wales then, a perfect choice. This turns out to be an enormous disaster for a variety of unexpected reasons. To start with, giving the territory to our vassal unvassalizes them, as it turns out. So now they're just a regular faction, they're not even our ally, we're just neutral to them. And on top of that, they consider that unvassalization to be a betrayal of sorts, so it's like breaking an alliance, meaning in one turn, our relationship will degrade and they will hate us. That's not the aesthetic we're going for in this pro-Wales campaign. I'm trying to de facto play as Wales, and the idea that I could just give all of my territory to them as I conquered it was the ideal mechanic to discover, however it has led to disaster now. There is actually something we can do about this to counteract this sudden disadvantage, but I'll get to that in a bit. My next move was to first get a peace treaty with Ireland, which was successful, and then do this. Go back to besieging Inverness, because we can finish off the Scots in theory with a bit better luck maybe this time, just because with Wales between us and England, England might not intervene, so maybe we will have time to do the massive siege required to get a breach on the wall, take out the towers, maybe even kill some of the troops if we stand here for long enough. But I then quickly discover the other secret downside to our weird Welsh territory gifting it has deleted all of our horde buildings, so that's fantastic. We've lost all of our recruitment options, we've lost our ability to make money, well, sort of anyway, we'll get to that. We are in trouble. Our advantage to being a horde has disappeared very quickly, so I started to think about maybe actually taking Inverness and using it as a base. Overall, pretty annoyed that that option that seems so promising seems to have caused so many problems. Now moving on, we haven't quite got to the point when I've got that breach I'm going for at the walls. However, check my cash. After a few turns, the fact I had no buildings seemed to sort of kick in. Not sure why it didn't kick in right away, but eventually we're losing double the amount of money that we're making all of a sudden, and we can't keep the siege going. We're about to go bankrupt. If you go bankrupt, your troops take attrition constantly and you lose a certain percentage of the army each turn. Could be worth going for an extra turn of siege and just taking the attrition to maybe make the siege a bit better, but I ultimately thought we're going to have to just assault them right now with no breach. We do have some options though. Because the siege has been going on for a little while, the walls will have lower health in some spots, so I thought maybe the catapults will be able to get us in. I also used the catapults at shorter range, moving them as close as possible, aided here by the fact the enemy's longbows weren't properly garrisoned into the walls, so I could get a bit closer to the walls than normal. However, the catapults still really suck. They're inaccurate and unpowerful, so it wasn't doing very much. Instead, I thought I'll try this. I'll just rush my horse archers at the wall and unleash volleys to try and clear out those longbows. Then I could put the catapults at point blank range relatively safely. Instead, it looks like I'm just hitting my own troops with the catapults. A nearby tower is getting involved as well. This plan basically didn't work, and the longbows eventually moved into a much better position right on top of the gate. Instead, I decided to do this the hard way. As the catapults continue to fail, in comes the ram. The gate is actually open, by the way, we're just not allowed to go through it because reasons. Once the ram reaches the open gate, the ram explodes in a weird fashion, and now we technically have destroyed the gate so we can go through it. All I need to do is clear out some space on the inside, and for this we're going to use the horse archers as much as we can. We don't want to go in until we've killed as much stuff as possible. Some longbows came out for some reason pursuing my horse archers. What I was basically doing is walking backwards and forwards with the horse archers, trying not to get hit by too much of the longbow fire. This is quite difficult since the horse archer is a nice big target for the longbows to shoot at. The other scheme is to have a ladder just in range of the longbows. You can see me trying it here, because it will make them shoot at the ladder. This doesn't do anything, it just uses up the enemy's ammunition, and you can sort of defeat longbows in this fashion if you're very careful. In this case it didn't work because the longbows ran away inexplicably. So here we are with the gate entrance now no longer defended by longbows, allowing me to come in for some close arrow support. They put a pike phalanx there instead, and my archers are going to gradually cut their way through it. I thought they were going to sally here, so I formed this shield wall below the gate, but no, they're just putting infantry on top of the gate, which will do absolutely nothing. Excellent. Shout out, by the way, to the rest of our army that isn't here, because they're in a standoff elsewhere, keeping the enemy's many longbow units away from this part of the city. Just miraculously, really. They've committed all of their ranged units to the part I'm not attacking, allowing me to do this exploity horse archer attack. Soon, we've cleared out a load of enemies, and now we need some more to kill, because I wanted stuff to come over and also die before I really committed to going inside when the enemy would likely all aggro towards me. So I need a few units to come over and just die near our archers until we're out of ammo, ideally, and then we'll see what we can do. I'm using here the extended shot on our longbows to shoot further than usual to try and tempt the enemy into coming over. These shots don't do very much damage. What they did do though is severely aggro the enemy, although to be fair, most of our army is now at this southern approach, so the AI was just kind of forgetting to come over here. Once we finally aggroed them, they started bringing over basically everything, so it's go time. In particular, we can equip the heavy shot and rain attacks on all of the knights and such that are stuck fighting a shield wall of infantry. The downside is that while I was doing that, I was effectively sacrificing my horse archers, because to shoot at the enemy's heavy stuff, I had to get hit by their longbows, which are now paying close attention and are actually defending the walls. So we do lose most of the horse archers. However, the enemy also lost most of their cav and their heavy infantry, making it much more plausible that we could go into the town after this and the balance bar remains equal. I'm also playing in a last stand kind of way here because we have no money left. We're going to have to get rid of these troops after this battle, no matter the result. Therefore, it doesn't really matter if we take extreme casualties. It might even be quite efficient to take extreme casualties in this battle. So yes, I'm not really keeping my distance from those longbows in order to get more attacks in. And then, I eventually made my play. While we weren't able to completely clear up the gateway, I got some lancers to just kind of jank through the enemy lines and get to the rear. Then they can start running through the town with a simple objective, just cheekily take the capture point while everybody else is distracted. However, there was a big unit of heavy knights on the capture point. That means we're not going to be able to do this, the lancers won't stand a chance. I sacrificed the lancers just killing longbows, while everything else ran away. There's one more option here, an option I think is only available in Total War Attila as I remember it, and that is to go for the draw. If you just retreat in a siege attack, you don't count as losing the battle, it's a draw. That means the siege carries on, but with both sides now having the troops they have left over from the battle. So effectively that was a skirmishy assault, not the main assault. We killed half the enemy, we lost half our stuff, and now we're going to lose a little bit more. Well, technically anyway. We're going to make our force cheaper to upkeep by merging the units. This doesn't actually lose you any troops, it's just getting around some of the jank in how the game calculates the costs of things. It's cheaper if everybody are collected together into bigger units basically. Therefore, we're able to keep going and we get the siege to this situation here, where a few turns later they actually ran out of supplies and started to die off, and you die off extremely fast from lack of supplies. You lose like half of your troops per turn. So, Scotland are now in huge trouble, and that balance bar looks good. Our army is looking nice and healthy, it's just very small. We take them down with an auto-resolve, and at last, victory is ours. And as mentioned, I don't think in other Total Wars you're allowed to withdraw from a battle and then just go back to the siege as it was before. I think that counts as a defeat in battle, so you would move away. Not quite sure about that though. Anyway, we move on to take the dive. Horde time is over. Our terrible hordes are now going to be sacrificed and turn us into this, a regular faction based out of Inverness. We have no money, which is disappointing. Inverness isn't a very good location. It's also in terrible condition because of us, and it costs loads of money to repair it. We're still losing money, so that's not going to happen. And in this mod, you need to convert buildings to your culture's version of them in order to get the full effects and to have a garrison spawn in the town in particular. That means we can't leave. If we leave, then any enemy army could just take the town immediately with no battle. That's a bit of a limiting situation. No cash, can't move your units, a big challenge run set of rules that is. I did sit there for a while trying to build up some cash, realised it was going to take forever and that nothing was going to happen in this campaign from now on, and then I hit the money cheats. We're going to pretend now that back when we sacked Constantinople, we got some religious relics, we've got the bones of Jesus and such, and the locals, being Christian, are so impressed by these gifts we've given them that they decided to repair and overhaul their stuff for free. So this money cheat just gives us loads of cash in theory, but also means your cash doesn't go down. So you have infinite money, sort of. We can get all of our refitting done, and that will all be good. We'll be a normal looking faction with a normal looking city soon. I'm also going to try and get Wales back using our new infinite wealth. I got this deal where we're now allied to them, and we're back in marriage alliance too. You might ask why I didn't go for vassalization, and it's because of that gift thing. I wanted to use it again, so I'm going to try it now with Wales being our ally rather than our vassal. Plus, me giving loads of money to Wales helps my secret desire for this to be a Wales campaign in some way. Wales should be on the up with all that free cash. Here's some more. After the cheats were turned off, I still needed to get rid of all of the money that stays in your account. So I gave them not only a massive pile of cash, but one of the royal daughters as well. So we now have a two-way marriage alliance. We're married both ways round. And Wales has absolutely loads of money. We still have a decent amount of money. I can't spend it right now though because we don't have any recruitment options. Need to get some of those buildings done. So we're skipping now to a bit later. Here's my grand army. Our income is still very small, so we can't even field a full army, and many of these units aren't that good. What I've done though is joined Wales's war against Ireland once again. I figured I'll come down and help them actually take it. I've put the joint war target onto Ireland to increase the chance that they'll actually go and make an attack. And soon enough we do see Welsh troops over there. They're actually just standing around. I figured at first they would be besieging Dublin. They're just standing right next to it. I think what might have happened here is they sacked the town recently and are just stuck here now, because the town is in terrible condition when we attack. Although the garrison is full, that could be because there's a glitch when if you try to repair a building and the repair finishes on the same turn that a town gets sacked, the repair kind of overwrites the sacking and respawns your garrison immediately. I think something like that is possible. Now you might note that while I'm making this siege, none of my Welsh allies are being drawn into this fight, despite the fact they're obviously in range, which I thought was a bit suspicious. Ideally, we'd just make an attack right now. Instead, I decided to wait a turn and see if they would get closer or something, and maybe we could then pull them into a fight. Well, instead, they went home by the looks of things, and the Irish army is also trying to leave. They've put themselves into ships. So now it's just us doing this siege. Well, I guess that's the same as before, because previously the Welsh were ignoring me. Inconvenient, because if they did help, this would be really easy, but with just our depleted force, it's actually not so easy for us. Well, I left the place under siege another turn. The Welsh didn't really come back. I noticed the Irish didn't leave either, which would be the ideal situation if they just sailed off somewhere. However, while they haven't left, them being in the sea is still really good for us. That balance bar's equal just because they have all those units technically in the battle, but they're not going to be in the battle because they're at sea. Therefore, if the battle only lasts a couple of minutes, they won't be able to deploy them onto the land and do anything. And the town, with its 99% wall damage, had tons of gaps, so I could just come in here immediately and go for the capture point. So we take out a general standing there, and then just block off all of the entrances with all of our stuff. A few units did come over to try and contest the place and take it back, but at this stage we can just sacrifice anything and everything to make sure they don't get in, because no matter how bad the fights we take in these choke points are, it's going to be better than fighting the enemy army as a whole, so any sacrifice is worth it. And we'll skip to the end. I did get the victory countdown. We didn't really fight most of their stuff, didn't lose that much stuff either. In fact, both sides didn't really lose much stuff. A nice peaceful battle where we have captured the town. Now we're going to test out my theory. I didn't want to occupy the place. I still want to make this technically a Wales campaign by giving them as much territory as I can. But will it work? Well, fortunately this time the mechanic works as intended. It just goes straight over to being Wales after this animation. The downside to this plan, as you might guess, is that I'm not getting anything from this. If they were my vassal, me giving them territory would increase my income, but because they're just an ally, we don't get anything, we just have a stronger ally. This could prevent us from ever getting an army that's better than our terrible army right now. I still haven't really thought of a way to get around this other than cheating. I'm not going to cheat though. I want to see if we can somehow become a powerful Mongol horde and be secretly playing as Wales. I understand the game wasn't designed for that, but we're not here to play the game as designed, of course. There was potential that there would be some peace for a while, but then Wales declares war on England in the next turn. So it's go time, really. I also noticed this increase slots button for Ireland. You can press this button to run some sort of secret executable that I guess is part of the mod that will change some very deeply baked in parts of the game to allow you to put more buildings in the same location. Potentially useful for us, trapped in our one city, but I was too scared to use it. I set the war target to be York next, hoping to follow behind the main Welsh invasion and help out with any sieges they get involved in. Well, by the next turn, they have blitzkrieged. York has already been captured, and they have Nottingham under siege. And I was like, well, that's good progress. At this rate, we can actually take down England. As mentioned, they are the #1 faction, England that is, which means they have lots of armies somewhere. Luckily, they don't appear to be right here. Also, the Irish are threatening to attack Inverness, but they're dead enough that that doesn't matter. I moved on south to support the attack at Nottingham, And it's good that I did, because they're trying to make an attack with a very weak looking army, the Welsh here. They have plenty more troops to use, they're just not using them. The English army isn't that good either though, so there's still a chance, at least there is with us coming in to back them up. At first I was certain our Welsh allies would have enormous trouble making this attack. You can see they've got some shoes now. This is an improvement on what we've seen before, but still plenty of progress still to make. The main issue though is that they're using their archers to attack the enemy's walls, a bad use of them. However, they are saved by the English despite all of their many shoes. Making even worse use of their archers, most of their longbows are facing the wrong direction in the wrong parts of town. So due to this miracle, the AI's archer assault will actually work. They're not under attack from the walls as they go in. And while they might struggle in the melees once they're over the wall, by that time my horse archers have shown up to shoot on in and deplete the enemy. And all that said, archers are quite good in melee, as I've said before. This was me trying to analyse that by just watching a fight, and we do see these enemy spear troops get killed or pushed back by the archers. I seem to remember that as well as having really good melee defense, sometimes archers have all of their damage on armor piercing mode rather than regular mode, because they're supposed to be carrying like short daggers in the game's logic that goes through armor. And that's why they're actually quite good in melee on the offensive sometimes as well. I don't even know because we don't have the stats window up, but archers seem to be pretty good in general. Now an exploit I've never seen before performed by the AI. The enemy gates open to let a routing unit out. I thought that if you tried to go through a gate that opens in that manner, there was an invisible wall that stopped you. But this enemy, or AI, general, goes right through and captures the gate. I was so certain you weren't allowed to do that, but maybe you can, or maybe only the AI can do it. Now the gates are captured, and we can go on in as well, although my horse archers stayed outside to shoot at more stuff. The Welsh general does go and kill himself after that. That's less of an exploit, I suppose, just trying to attack the centre on his own. We're gradually backing him up, and it gets to the point when we've marauded around the town with our cav just taking out the spare archer units. And we make this attack on the centre. They do have their heavy knights there, that's one threatening unit, but everything else can probably take them down. I was distracted looking at these ruins and thinking of how the archaeological value of them is probably being reduced by us fighting on top of them. Oh, how these silly peasants don't know what they're ruining. Well, perhaps they didn't mind. We come to this conclusion in the battle. We completely annihilated the enemy. It went much better than expected, actually. I thought the Welsh would die and I might be able to carry through the battle. They actually did pretty well. There's a chance they would have finished off the battle without us even being there. Now though, some bad news, because those Irish rebels have besieged Inverness. I recognise this immediately as a problem I've seen before in Attila, an AI-only exploit, another one. Because siege damage is applied at the start of the player's turn, not the person who's under siege's turn, it means you're never able to sally and repulse a siege before they can apply some damage. So the AI can constantly put you under siege and retreat, never allowing you to fight them, and it still does the siege damage, which is ruining our economy. We're now in famine as well, so if we leave this as it is, we'll actually lose all of our frontline troops as well. A nice big exploit from those backline antics. Because of all that, we actually have to go back and defeat that army. They will never stop to fight our garrison, they'll just constantly retreat while the garrison is killed by the siege. Here we are then, a bit later, we brought everything back to finish them off. Then I started moving down to rejoin the front line. Here's me moving back again because it looks like the English were going to land troops to attack Edinburgh. They're not actually, but while I was standing here, I had a bit of a revelation. It was when I was in the diplomacy menu. I noticed that Wales is called Kingdom of Wales, but before they were called Principality of Wales. And that made me realise, back when I gave them that territory, Edinburgh in fact, that might have been why I lost them as a vassal, because there's this thing in the mod where you can change what your faction's name is, and it's quite possible that in the game's internal logic you're considered to be a different faction after you make the name change, and maybe that's why I lost my vassal by forcing them to get upgraded into a different faction. So I had some hope now that I could re-vassalize Wales, and maybe it wouldn't glitch out next time. Here's me trying to get that deal by offering them 6.5 million money thanks to a few hacks. They weren't willing to take that deal, and I think it's because there's like a hard-coded logic that your own allies won't become your vassal, at least sometimes at least. Essentially, by unallying them and then giving them the same deal, they did become my vassal. That's better. Now we're going to make money off the conquests of Wales, which is much more in line with what I wanted this campaign to be like. And on top of that, we can levy Welsh units, which are effectively English units because they're a copy-paste. But still, all good stuff. That's what we like to see, and maybe it won't glitch out next time we try to gift them some territory. We'll have to get to that. As for the Frontline War, not too much is happening, despite the fact that Wales now have effectively infinite money. They don't really have many troops. I thought I'd explain why I think that is. Most likely, they took all of the money I gave them and upgraded all of the buildings in all of their towns. However, in this game and in this mod, when you upgrade things, you get pretty massive penalties that, in my own preference, causes me to just never upgrade things at all. And many of those penalties reduce your income, so it's likely that Wales has a massive pot of nearly infinite money, but has no income, so they don't want to hire any troops. The AI doesn't try to use its reserve of cash to pay for troops effectively. That's my prediction for why Wales is so weak, despite them having a decent amount of territory and having infinite money. Now, as I was ranting, you can see the next thing that happened. I tried to fortify in southern Wales because the English kept attacking there, and I thought I could either stop them coming in on their little raids, or make a raid myself. And what ends up happening is they send everything they have to just attack me. However, I was fortified, so we do have that on our side. And I thought, well, fort battles usually end up being pretty exploity. Let's just try and kill them all right now. The key to this will be our wings of Cav outside of the camp. Everything else will just sit there and try not to die. The wings of Cav will get up to shenanigans and try to tip this in our favour. One thing we need to do to make that easier is take out the enemy Cav that are going to counter shenanigan. Here's me not doing a terribly good job because I wasn't paying close enough attention. The enemy get a nice wedge charge into the front of my general. That's where the model is. So a nice risk of actually losing the general there. Fortunately, we don't, and then the general's bodyguard is a nice armoured unit, good for tanking while everything else goes in for the surround. On the other side of the camp, the horse archers will just plug away at the enemy as they gradually walk on in, and you might note the enemy aren't all attacking at once, the usual mistake. That will make things way easier for us. We get a nice surround on that cav unit, with one unit setting up behind the brawl ready to receive this next charge, which looks like it's about to get started. Everything in the camp is in shield wall formation in the gaps, ready to stop the enemy, but because we don't have that many units, we actually can't cover all of the gaps, so a couple of enemy units will be getting inside the camp. Well, that's not going to be so much of a problem as it turns out, we'll see that in a sec. Our fights against the enemy cav go well, we just have more and higher stat likely as well. Then, ideal targets emerge. We're going to maraud around and attack all of those unguarded longbows to make sure they don't do too much damage. Meanwhile, my ranged units are taking out the enemy's generals who have piled into the fights, potentially dangerous, but we have longbows and javs shooting into the fights, and they're going to be pretty good at hitting cav since they're just above the fight, a nice easy target. We kill their main general there. I think we might have killed one or two more in those fights as well. All great stuff. My horse archers were distracted for quite a long time actually, fighting that unit of knights off on the flank, but at least the knights aren't charging into the camp or getting behind our lines, anything like that. And on the other side of the field, we're just completely annihilating longbowmen all over the place with our heavy and light cav. Now, as I said, some enemies did just come into the camp through the open entrances, and then they left. For whatever reason, in this battle, the enemy's morale is absolutely through the floor. We've seen units like these spearmen early fight to the last man against 10 units of cav, but it seems when they come into the camp they are not interested in staying, and that makes life way easier. It's a similar deal with the longbows. Normally they tend to fight for quite a long time. They were routing easier than we've seen them rout before. This could be explained by the loss of the general/generals, but it just seemed like their morale was too low for that alone to be the explanation. I thought maybe they have a disease, or maybe there's something in this mod that makes attackers in fort battles have less morale to simulate it being more difficult for them than a field battle, something like that. Well, I don't really know, but check this out. As some of their later units come in, they just rout without fighting us, and they've barely taken any casualties. These aren't the spearmen early we knew. So there must be something going on. losing a general loses like 7 morale. These guys are down like 30 morale from something or other. I'm sure there are other debuffs, we can't see what they are because that would be too nice. However, even though we have this terrible fight where our jabs are fighting tons of enemy spears, they rout the second we flank attack. This is kind of good actually. This is like realistic. Units in real historical battles do pretty much rout the second anything goes wrong. You don't really have to kill many people to freak the rest of the people out. So it had this very realistic feel where once you've outmaneuvered the enemy, their troops just withdraw, and it's like, yes, that is what happens, and then they die trying to withdraw, which indeed is where most historical casualties do come from. The long and short of it is that we absolutely annihilated them. It went way better than I thought it was going to. I thought it would be kind of scrappy and we'd just somehow win thanks to being in a fort. We barely took any damage. We annihilated thousands of English troops, most of the English armies, most likely. That's going to cripple them. We also get a turn of replenishment as well to add on top of that. We can immediately counterattack and go for Bristol. I lay a siege, and we're then going to have another battle pretty much straight away because they managed to gather together some stuff to try and break the siege, plus there was the garrison army. So that's good, we now have a siege draw out, we might have a chance to skip the siege, an easier battle than last time, although now it's a regular field battle. The stuff that was going on in the fort battle will not be going on here, whatever that might have been. In this battle, the enemy's army is split up between various groups, so that means we need to run in with the cav and disrupt them while they're trying to form up to be really annoying, and we successfully reach the first group where most of their army is not going to be able to help out. We just bypass these slow-moving pike units and run on in to attack the longbows. The only downside to this plan is we're attacking them right on the edge of the map since I rushed forward so fast, meaning they will be able to escape quite easily. Not the ideal situation for a siege draw out, but still we're going to kill a bunch of stuff, relatively risk-free as long as we keep running around and avoiding those spears. Here we see that morale seems to be back to where it was before. This unit is basically dead, takes a huge rear charge and still doesn't quite rout. Not quite sure what it takes, but these guys have true metal. While the longbows are a little bit more routable, they're actually on the verge of routing after taking half casualties. That's similar to what we saw in the fort battle. That means it's not very good evidence for what's going on either way, but the main point is we're going to defeat those longbows without them shooting the longbows, and that's their main strength, of course. That gets rid of them. One of their generals comes over to watch, I guess, not quite to help, but just to sit there. That was great. We set up the horse archers to take him out. We actually didn't kill the general, as I recall. The unit then runs away. At least they made a good decision at the end there. Here's an example of that morale surely being back. We absolutely pile drive this spearman early unit. These guys aren't routing, had to drive them down to the last like 1 or 2 guys before the rout. I'm pretty sure, by the way, that back before we took Inverness, I set it back to easy battle difficulty, trying to make some sort of comeback, and I think it's still on it for both this battle and the previous one. So whatever difference it makes, I guess it's less than something else, but it should be reducing the enemy's morale by some amount. Maybe it's significant. Well, what is significant is that the enemy's army is being split up. Tactically, they're in huge trouble because they're running after our cav and we can run away. This is precisely the mistake that people made trying to fight the Mongols in real life that screwed them over. So we take all of their heavy units out of their army, fight them separately like right here where I had to sacrifice most of a unit of lancers to keep these knights in position while the heavy arrows did their stuff, but it's probably worth it. Those heavy knights are a big threat, and as more come in we just keep running away and keep shooting. We killed their general there, one of them. That's not their leading general who's in charge of the army technically, but maybe once you've killed a general everybody gets the general debuff, not quite sure. There's the real one coming in, already half dead from his antics earlier. Essentially, we just win this battle tactically, so we're going to use the tactical camera just for fun. I thought I'd show this next phase from this perspective, just because it's an option in the game, not a useful option, but you can see the various squares moving about. The enemy's archers were trailing really far behind everything else, so we sent the cav to go to the other side of their main position and absolutely annihilate those archers, and the spears can't possibly get back in time to stop us. That all goes very well. There's even a tiny bit of normal battle right towards the end, as the enemy's infantry tried to attack this hill where I'd set up my infantry, so now our longbows will be shooting down into these spears. They can't get out of the situation, essentially. They could try running away, but my cav's back there. They can try running up the hill to attack, but we do have a spear wall in place. Not a very good one, but probably as good as they are with our Ruthenian spearmen very far from home. And the battle just ends due to a chain rout at this stage. We do have to chase everything down because it's mostly reinforcements. The game will meanly not delete them if we just end the battle. We get through that, leading us to here. We completely annihilated them once again. So we've just seen 2 big victories. That's going to spell the end of England for sure. But the real moment of truth is right here. We auto-resolve Bristol. Can we give it to Wales without everything falling apart? The answer is yes, we can. Maybe that whole principality to kingdom thing was actually correct. Now we just gave them the territory. Now we are playing the Wales campaign in medieval 1212, or at least as close as you could possibly get. And it's going very well by the looks of things. Things slow down for a bit now because England don't have any troops. Wales can't be bothered to attack. So I ultimately just sieged down the remaining English settlements. This took a while, but there was no resistance, and that was that. So Wales now controls all of Great Britain and Ireland, except for Inverness, where their vassal overlords have their base. This is a pretty big achievement, but it's not quite the end of our war, because England are on the continent as well. That means we're eventually here, crossing towards Rouen, hoping to get a foothold on the continent for Wales. You can see they're recruiting an army here, so there is going to be some resistance, plus a garrison. I landed and laid siege. They brought over 1 extra guy or something and then sallied out against me. And notably, Wales aren't really doing anything. I was trying to use the war target system to get them to cross the water. I think they're planning on doing it at this stage, but they haven't quite got their act together. Well, we don't need them, because with this sally, we have the chance to skip the siege. And with similar battles we've seen before, because the enemy are split up, we want to be hyper aggressive and just attack their initial deployment zone immediately with our cav. So in we go, hunting down some nice, easy to charge longbow units. One thing that was holding me back was that I, for some reason, lost my best unit of cav between the last couple of shots, basically. We had this gold heavy cav unit that I was using to tank things and annihilate longbow units in previous battles. It's now gone. We also lost our general, by the way, as well, so we now have a lower ranked general, meaning some of our powerful units weren't there anymore. But we're at this stage in the campaign gradually replacing our cav with Welsh-style cav. We have 2 Welsh-style units, I think, in the raiding force right here. There's one of them, the mounted sergeants, currently being attacked by some spears, but the horse archers might help out with that. Well, the idea is all there. After taking down the first group, I ran away to let the second group attack me in a fairly normal fashion, since we have a gigantic hill advantage. There's some spears who refuse to break were causing issues. They are leading with their heavy cav, that's what we want to see, and these foot knights look so depressed as they just trudge around being hit by arrows. Such is the lot when the Mongols invade you, and now these mounted knights are going to throw their lives away. They charge up the hill into our line and just get stuck, and then we're going to absolutely pound them with light infantry. We've got longbows and javs to throw in there, and that will take them out quite fast. So here it is, on mainland Europe, the English are getting Agincourt before our eyes. Truly, we've reached the pinnacle of the Wales campaign, and elsewhere they're being Mongoled at the same time as our annoying cav raids just take out things all over the place. Looks like one general there tried to escape and died. Their main general just died up at the front lines. Things are starting to look pretty good. All of their infantry are effectively being wasted right now because they can't do anything. They do get this good attack with this other general that's going to take out a bunch of our horse archers, but I'm quick to run away. Looks like I'm paying attention with the micro. Here our mounted sergeants are encountering the good version of longbows that aren't moving around. Might have that really high melee defense, I still don't know. Looks like our cav was struggling to kill them. We're not struggling to kill the majority of their army because they're very slowly walking up the hill, getting absolutely pounded by longbow attacks and javs. Once they finally get here, we've got a shield wall of armoured sergeants that's going to annihilate those spear troops. Basically, we're doing very well, and the last bit of the battle was just taking down their general. They almost killed my general back here because I was using my general as a tank. Ultimately, I got him out the way, cut down their knights, and the battle was a win. In fact, it was not only a win, it was a complete win. We killed absolutely everything on the enemy side. That means we get their settlement right now without having to wait for our turn. So we turn that over to Wales, of course. Wales has conquered, they've got their foothold on the continent, that's all looking good. Next I wanted to go to the northeast. However, Wales actually landed while I was standing there, by the looks of things, ran past the front line, and attacked and liberated France at Paris. England did control Paris, but Wales have chosen not to take it, which probably would have been the better choice. They've made France anew, now as a Welsh ally, although they broke that alliance pretty much right away. Overall, a mistake, unfortunately, but good effort. It does shore up our front lines and make things nice and secure for us, I guess. We capture Tournai with no issues whatsoever after a bit of sieging down. I then next have to technically go to war with Flanders, or I'm already at war with them. I should fight them because they border us now. We've been at war with Flanders for most of the campaign just for no reason. However, somebody else declared war on us, some kind of proto-Dutch faction up there. So I thought, let's go after them. I went into the sea to sail over towards their territory, but they were sailing back the other way and meet me with overwhelming force, absolutely spamming those crossbows. Didn't like the looks of this, so I started to retreat, and we were able to get away with things here. I decided to land my force, thinking maybe I could then walk to their territory. But we see Wales actually jumps in on this. They sail out. The enemy withdraw, then push back, and by the looks of things completely annihilate the Welsh fleets. Well, I'm not completely sure what happened, but by the time I went back to the sea, the enemy fleets had sailed off somewhere, perhaps pursuing the Welsh survivors, and I went to their base, only to find there was already a Welsh army there besieging it. Looks like Wales is starting to actually use its vast money and resources to do stuff. This is looking a bit better. So far they haven't really been helping on the mainland. So we blockade the ports, another army shows up, and a bit later we get this completely one-sided auto-resolve to just finish the enemy off. No sign of those two stacks that were marauding around. Maybe they've gone so far away they're basically dead, or maybe Wales actually killed them somewhere. Doesn't matter too much. We've taken another territory, all very nice. Then I started sailing back home. Along the way, we get this nice marriage offer. They want us to marry our heir to one of their princesses, further joining the houses of the Mongols and the Welsh. That's what we like to see. This alliance will last forever. Our next project was one of opportunity, because I noticed that County of Flanders faction had declared war on France and taken Paris while I wasn't looking. So we can go down and use this as an excuse to attack Paris ourselves. And indeed, the place is completely wrecked due to recent fighting, so it's going to be pretty easy for us to take it. Had to wait a turn to make a ram or something. But then, it's ours. And with this, Wales is receiving a big and powerful city once it's repaired and stops being diseased. Anyway, all looking good. France still exists, by the way, somewhere to the south. I started thinking I'll move back towards Tournai and then maybe go to Trier and continue fighting this County of Flanders. But on the way, they appear to get annihilated by France attacking from the south, because now it says they have no territory on the diplomacy screen. So we're going to instead have a chat with France about us declaring war on the Duchy of Brabant. That's the faction that controls Antwerp, which is on our border to the northeast, between the two blocks of territory we've made. So we get non-aggression with France and join the war, and then go over to have a go at attacking Antwerp. There is actually quite a lot of stuff here though, and that balance bar doesn't look too good, mainly because they have this huge block of knights in their garrison and some heavy troops as well. Looking pretty good actually, this faction. Well, it's an anticlimax, because while this looked hard, it turned out to be easy. Ages later, I sieged them down a whole load. Wales also declared war on Brabant just to be nice, and sent over troops to help, so you can see I have all of these scraps of armies now gathered around me. We end up with that balance bar being the absolute opposite, and we can just storm in and take this place for free. Truly, this is the majesty of Mongol and Welshmen working together. Side by side, we slaughter our enemies. This Holy Roman Empire faction is no issue for us. Also helping out in this union was the fact the enemy had a plague or something, because they were taking attrition even before they ran out of supplies in that siege. Well, we hand over the territory, and this means that Wales will have a nice even looking territory on the mainland. Also, it looks like it angers the Holy Roman Empire. Maybe there's some potential consequence to that, I don't know. We're going to ignore any such thing, and what I'm going to do is declare that this is the end of the campaign. This was the victory condition. It's not quite the end of this video, but here was what I was going for. We've got this stripe of territory on the mainland. Wales's prospects look very promising right now. However, this is where things also started to majorly fall apart, which I'll talk about next. You might note we're at war with Castile for no reason whatsoever, not quite sure. I think they actually declared war on me as part of something to do with when I was in their territory way earlier in the game trying to grind some money as a horde. Maybe that was it anyway. And this war proves to be disastrous. You can see me here following behind what remains of the Welsh army. By the time I was anywhere near this battlefront, Wales had tried to invade Castile and apparently lost most of their stuff. And here goes the rest of it. We get this peace deal where I can pay money to not get killed by Castile. Barely any second thoughts there, just immediately accepted the deal. Everyone but us dies, and that's the end of our invasion of Castile. But it's not the end of their invasion of me, as it's going to turn out. I sailed back home, and by the time we're back, things are already looking a bit chaotic. Roan's been taken by someone or other from somewhere, and Tournai is under threat by Castile, who are now standing outside. Antwerp's been taken by Austria, and Groningen's going the same way. Wales does still have one army, but it's mutinous and sitting in the sea right now. They've definitely downsized. They're not re-recruiting after their recent losses, since that was like 10 turns ago now. They're just not doing it anymore. A shame. We can at least step in and besiege Antwerp and try to take this place back, since there's going to be barely any wall strength left over. So there we go, we've got a little bit of the territory back, and Groningen somehow just breaks its siege. I think the enemy decided to not attack it, which was nice. Then looks like Paris is lost to France somehow. I think Castile might have taken it, and then France declared war on Castile and took Paris back. Well, you don't want to lose Paris to the French, that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. My reaction to this growing mess was to run away, because I thought, well, I want this campaign to end anyway. I've had my fun. I'm not going to help you, Wales. See if you can deal with this on your own. They definitely can't. Look at the situation by the time I actually got home. England is back somehow. Castile is currently raiding southern England. And you might note that Wales now has no armies. After they lost their armies in that naval invasion, they just straight up didn't make any more. The AI just gave up, and well, so will I guess. I'm just going to go home and sulk. Wales must still have infinite money, but they don't want to use it. They've got loads of really high-level cities, and I decided to actually check what buildings they have to follow on from that theory I mentioned earlier about maybe them hamstringing themselves by making too many good buildings. And from my assessment, I judged they must have a massive food deficit all the time. Maybe that's part of the reason the AI doesn't want to do anything. Not quite sure how the AI works, but it might be the case that them being really rich has in some way caused them to stop playing, and that's why they're getting annihilated. And unfortunately, our one stack of troops isn't enough to clean up after the sloppy AI all the time. Plus, I didn't want to. So that's why, that little moment earlier where we had that nice stripe of territory on the mainland, let's imagine this game has short victory conditions, and we achieved it by taking Wales to conquer its local territory and get a foothold on the continent, basically becoming the new England back at the start of the campaign, even a little bit more powerful than them, perhaps. And as for the Mongol part of our tale, well, it's a happy ending, I guess. We got away from it all, we're at the other end of the known world, sitting in our frozen wasteland, a nice castle up in the mountains of Scotland, not quite starving to death, waiting for the world to gradually work through our Welsh allies. Well, this is the nightmare divorce phase of the Mongol-Welsh relationship. Let's just think back to the happier days, the honeymoon days, when things were going very well. About 10 minutes ago in this video. Well anyway, thanks for watching this summary of my Wales campaign in medieval 1212 AD. It kind of went like how I wanted it to, maybe, or something. Join me for another campaign in something else another time.